Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's the Bugs Bunny Birthday Blowout, brought to us by Kemco. Bugs Bunny Birthday Blowout, originally released in 1990, was the second Looney Tunes themed video game that I played as a child, with the first one being Crazy Castles, a series that is a bit crazy all of its own, and I'm sure I'll get to the games eventually. So here we go with Bugs Bunny's Birthday Blowout for the NES. The story for the game is very simple. It's Bugs Bunny's 50th birthday and he's being invited to a party to celebrate him, and his friends aren't very happy that he's being celebrated and they're not. So they're going to try to stop him before he ends up making it to his party. The game is a pretty typical platformer that's broken up into 6 worlds with 4 levels each. As we begin level number 1, you can see that the characters themselves are actually pretty small. Bugs has a hammer that he's able to use to take out most enemies throughout the game, as well as a large amount of enemies can actually be landed on. You won't defeat them by jumping on their heads, but instead you can land on them and actually use them as a platform. In the upper left corner of the screen is the number of carrots you currently have. These carrots are used to play the mini-games at the end of each one of the levels, and then of course your life counter represented by the hearts. Now, this life counter refills automatically after every single level, and because of this, and most enemies not taking a whole lot of damage, there's a lot of levels in the game that you can simply just keep on moving through, especially the early levels, and there's no chance the enemies will probably be able to take you out. Your biggest threat, honestly, in the early stages is falling into a pit. At the end of each one of the levels, there is a mini-boss-like encounter. For example, one of the ones we'll most commonly see is Daffy Duck here, where we have to grab the carrot to complete the stage. The carrot symbols, once you grab them, become WB logos, and once they do that, they actually are a solid platform, so a lot of times you'll have to use these in order to get up to higher platforms like we used there to grab the carrot and complete level 1. Don't worry, we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk about the bonus game as we go throughout the game. Level number 2 is a little bit more confusing. One enemy that you'll see a lot is these weird kind of like bouncing ball enemies, snake things. If they aren't red, they won't hurt you. If they're the other color, green, sometimes they're different colors. As long as they're not red though, they won't hurt you, so you can just walk through them, and a lot of times that's really what you'll be able to do. Plus they do very little damage like most enemies in the game, so usually don't have too many problems running through these guys. This screen, you have a few ways to go about it. You're always going to the right here, but you can climb up the ladders and take the top platforms, which is what I prefer. It also gives you easier access to the exit at the end. Here we have our first battle against Tweety. Tweety is shy, likes to hide behind either bushes or rocks, whatever happens to be in the level you're battling him on. You have to kind of lure him out by going the opposite way, and then quickly turn around and hit him with a hammer. It only takes 3 hits to defeat Tweety, and that's pretty much what you'll be doing throughout all the game with the bosses. 3 hits will take them out. The only annoying factor, when you get hit, you are invulnerable and flashing and such, but you're unable to attack during that same time period, so it's best try to avoid taking hits during those boss encounters just to get those hammer hits in quicker to get through the battles. The next level, you can use these platforms to keep on to the top part. There are plenty of times throughout levels where there's other entrances like the rabbit holes and such, basically to take you throughout. We're only going to be checking out the ones that we need to, like there are a few maze-like areas. Nothing challenging by any means compared to other NES classics, but still, there are a little bit of maze-like things with those pipes, so anytime you see me ignoring one, it's just because it would lead me to a dead end and unnecessary items at the time. Throughout levels, there are a few hearts here and there, so a lot of levels as well, I'll know that I can run through and take damage because there's going to be a full health replenishment before I get to the end. The Daffy Chamber is very easy, just ride the platform over to the right and jump up to grab the carrot very easily, and we're moving on to the 4th round of Stage 1. As we begin the level, you're going to see a rabbit hole right away. Just ignore that and keep on moving to the right side. These platforms can be a bit annoying that they disappear a few moments after you land on them, but if you jump immediately while landing on them, by the time you come back down, they do reappear, so you should land safely. This area looks trickier than it actually is. A lot of times there's big leaps of faith kind of things with big gaps where you're not able to see what's below you. A lot of times you're actually safe. There are moments when you aren't going to be safe if you drop down, but there actually is a surprising number of platforms scattered throughout all the levels in the game. Climb up this ladder up here and then use the platform over to the right to finally get to the far right and drop down this rabbit hole to get to the boss encounter against Wile E. Coyote. He does have a few things he's going to try to do to you, but it's just very awkward, and the hammer, 3 hits, battle's done, and we're moving on to stage 2. That simply. At the end of each one of the worlds or stages, you do get a chance to play a separate minigame from just the one that we normally do at the end of most levels. This one is a whack-a-mole-like one. We'll do it a couple of times throughout the game, but it's pretty much the same thing each time as well. World 2 is a desert-themed world. Clearly, the game was inspired by Super Mario Bros. 2. There's just a lot in this game that reminds me of that title, and just having a desert world, not only as a theme, it's not something we always saw, as well as that being the second world of Mario 2, it just kind of all fits together, right? Even some of the blocks look similar. One cool thing I do like about this game that makes it stand out are those kind of seesaw platforms that you're able to stand on one side and use the hammer on the other to launch yourself upwards. It's a little awkward, but once you kind of get the timing down on it and see when it can be useful, there are a few moments where you'll have to do that to get around. This game loves breakaway platforms, though, rocks that fall away, so you're never quite sure what's safe to land on a lot of times. We have another Daffy chamber here. We're going to use the seesaw at the end to hammer our way up and then grab the carrot to move on to the next level. As you can see with the bonus games, how it works is very simple. You end up getting the numbers that you draw. You can draw 5 numbers, and if any of those 5 numbers appear in a row, you get an extra life. And the center space is a free space, so you end up getting a lot of extra lives usually. The game's soundtrack may not be amazing, but for the most part I actually do enjoy it, and the composer, Hiroyuki Masuno, worked on many of Kemco's games during the NES era, such as Rescue the Embassy Mission, a really kind of cool underrated game, one of my all-time favorites, and Snoopy's Silly Sports Spectacular, just because I've always been a fan of Snoopy, as well as the NES version of Shadowgate, Uninvited, and Deja Vu. Be very careful during this area, even with the shaking screen and all, it can be a little disorienting for sure. Just make it carefully over these platforms to the pipe-like chimney on the left side. Once in here, you have a couple of more tricky platforms away from the weird-looking Rob the Robot-like thing firing out projectiles at us. I also find the Sphinx sprite in the background really kind of funny. Just the little bit of movement that those Sphinxes end up doing is kind of funny. At the end of this area here, use this platform to spring yourself upwards to use this, and then get into the upper left corner so you can find another one of those pipes to go down. Here is where we battle Tweety again. Just like before, Tweety's hiding, gotta get him out, and then hit him 3 times with that hammer in order to drop Tweety, grab the carrot, and move on to the next stage. Stage 3 of the desert-themed area is more of the same. Watch out for those kind of like grinder things going. They're oddly placed and usually not really much of a threat because of that placement. Here's a nice heart, so you can grab that in case you've taken any damage at this point in the level, but not really that difficult to kind of get around with this one. This is the only kind of tricky spot usually, with the rock falling down. There's that robot right there, so getting up and being able to hit the spring can be a pain, but thankfully, another heart right there to fully replenish you, so usually not too bad. Continuing on through here, you can see that pipe up to the left, and we're going to keep going, though, over to the right side. We don't have to deal with that one. Be very careful on these small little jumps here. That platform will break apart, and then you have a couple of those robots back to back, and since they continue to fire out projectiles, the game comes to a little bit of a crawl. A few moments later, we're going to be heading uphill, watching out for a bunch of boulders before finally making it to the pipe at the end. And here's a little bit of a maze, no Daffy this time. All you gotta do is break the blocks and grab the carrot. Easiest one of these yet. Here's the final level of the desert-themed world. Be careful of the platforms here to disappear. If you jump up, of course, they do come back before you're going to land, so no real problems as far as being able to get through. Now, it is a little confusing. There's a few kind of paths here, and so we're going to go into the pipe in the bottom right corner. Be careful of the falling clocks. These clock enemies just continue to fall down, and they explode when you hit them. So really not a whole lot of benefit to even trying to take them out half the time. Go down the next pipe to the right, and it seems like we're in the same exact thing as we begin the next area, but don't worry, we've actually made progress. As you can see, we've made a little bit farther in. Keep going to the right and drop down another pipe. Now, this is a little bit trickier. We have the moving platform back and forth. Make sure it's going left. You can also just jump straight to the disappearing platform, but just be careful of that. And there is a big piece of health before the boss against Yosemite Sam. He does fire out multiple projectile bullets, of course, at you, as to be expected, but still just 3 quick hammer blows, and Yosemite Sam is done, and we're moving on to that next world. It may not look a whole lot different at first, but the next themed world is a mountain-themed world. You can see it's kind of volcano-esque. There's lava flowing in a few areas that you want to make sure you, for sure, avoid, as well as, of course, plenty of other pitfalls that we'll see throughout the levels. One of the only downsides of the game is it doesn't have a ton of enemy variety. We've seen most of them now, like the poisonous frogs, the malicious mallets, as well as stuff like the fireball. And yeah, that is a fireball, the dust cloud-like thing bouncing around, apparently. That's actually a fireball, and you can actually land on top of it as well. There's another enemy later on that we'll see introduced, the ghost enemy, which is similar, but you can't land on it and damages you if you land on any portion of it. The only enemy that really got kind of a creative name is that Rob the Robot-esque turret robot that we deal with quite often throughout the game. That is the jumping telescopic bullet sprinkler. The Daffy chamber is very easy. Use the platform to just jump right up to the one rock and then jump straight to the rock, holding the carrot, and move on to that next level. The next level is a little bit tricky to navigate. Another enemy I may not have talked about yet is the 1-ton spring weight. Those are pretty much more of like the soapbox type of thing, or even the hammer, except it's not swinging at you, it just springs upwards, but you can still land on it and even use it as a platform to get up to higher things. One of the things I do like about this game is because you have kind of that freedom, health isn't really the biggest deal in the game. You usually have a decent amount of it, and there's pickups and such. You can get a nice flow and fun platforming with bugs and figuring out kind of these best paths to take in some of these levels. In here, we're going to go over to the far right and go down this pipe, which actually just takes us to above where we just were. The pipe that we just were in is below this one. Gotta be very careful on these platforms. They break apart, it's very easy to fall down, and it's annoying. There's only a handful of ones that won't break, as we finally get to the pipe up here, which gets us to the boss encounter, this time against Elmer Fudd. Similar to Yosemite Sam, except he fires out less bullets. I think they explode and such, so they're a little bit bigger, but you're going to be close to him usually before those bullets do anything, so another very easy boss. Anyway, we're moving on to the next level. Round 3 of World 3 has a big lava pit to start off, so be very careful. Then be also careful of the stop-and-go worms that are right here, the traffic light worms that keep switching colors there from this stage red to blue. In other levels, like I said, it's red to green. That's just based on the NES and the limited amount of colors that are able to be displayed at a single time. So instead of having to completely rework the enemy, they just have that green be interchangeable depending upon the tile map, of course. There's a lot of the stop-and-go worms here, and this jump can be a bit of a pain as we have to spring upwards and get to this moving platform. It also slows down a bit because of just so much stuff going on, so be cautious while going over there, and thankfully the next jumps are a little easier. We can get up here and then use the disappearing platform to climb up. If you fall, be very careful. Hug either the left or right D-pad to try to land safely. If not, you'll end up landing in that deadly lava. Continue over to the right. There's a bunch more pits along this path, as you can see, but thankfully not too difficult as we reach the end pipe. For this one, we have to deal with Daffy again, but really not, because you can just drop off the first platform and land instantly on to the carrot and move on to the next stage. The final level of the mountain-themed world here, and plenty of more pits and giant flaming fireballs shooting up from the pits below. The volcanoes can also be a bit obnoxious, so try to be careful of them. You can stand in between the fire, but then they immediately fire out just a moment later, so sometimes it can be difficult to get past the volcanoes without getting hurt. A little bit ways onto this screen, as you can see, there's a bit of an earthquake that can be annoying. Here I cause the frogs to kind of glitch out. Basically, landing on the frog as it jumps sometimes causes it to mess up its trajectory, running into objects and such, and it'll kind of fall through things. In that case, it took out another frog at that same time. Regardless of that, you want to break through the blocks, fall down safely and land, and have to go through a series of tricky jumps to the left to make it to this barrel. Then the next area, a bit more tricky jumps at the beginning with some fireballs and other things. The game is throwing a lot at you. Thankfully, it doesn't damage you too bad, so you just kind of want to keep trucking. The boss for this world is Sylvester and Sylvester Jr. Starting off with Sylvester Jr. on the skateboard, you'll then have to deal with his dad, Sylvester. It's pretty much the same deal. Sylvester's even slower and sometimes runs right into a wall and very easy to hit him a couple of times. Simple fight, but kind of cool to have both Sylvester and Sylvester Jr. in the game. The next world is a cave-themed world. I actually do like the color palette here, using the green and kind of bluish stuff for the backgrounds. One thing I don't like about this world is the consistent lightning kind of flashes and such that cause the screen to go dark. Nothing else disappears or anything when that happens, but it can be a bit startling and difficult to navigate because of it. You can go down this pipe right here, it just takes you to that pipe right below if you really want to get that carrot desperately. Watch out all throughout the cave worlds for those fallen stalactites from the ceiling. They come out in pairs sometimes and can consistently keep falling, so a lot of times you have to time your jumps in between these falling spikes, which will always be annoying. Here we're going to use the moving platforms to kind of slowly get through. It slows down a bit because of all those falling spikes, but just kind of keep persevering. The waterfalls are one of the few things I try not to run through because it takes away an entire heart of damage. As you've noticed, a lot of enemies take away like a quarter or 1/3 of a heart with their hits, but some of the heavy hitting enemies, like those waterfalls, take away a lot, so you have to be very cautious around them. Use the carrot platforms that you make into those WB logos to get up to that last jump, and then get to the pipe at the end. Here we have Daffy just jump quickly up to the platforms above and grab the carrot with little to no problem. Here we have those ghost enemies. I mentioned them before. They're similar in pattern to the fireballs, except these ones you can't land on. They just hurt you instantly. You think the fireballs would do the same if you landed on top of them, but that's just not the case. Watch out for the flaming oil barrel drums, and just like in the first level, the lights will sometimes occasionally go out, and you'll have to deal with a bit of darkness. One thing that's also weird with the game is the whole kind of foreground objects, such as the rock formations or rocks or trees that Tweety is able to hide behind. When you actually go behind these as well, you become invulnerable, but at the same time you cannot swing your hammer. So if for some reason you're in one of those battles and you're like, why can't I swing or why didn't it work? You may be behind one of the pieces of the foreground, which negates your attack ability, which is interesting, but doesn't work as efficiently as you would like it. Here we gotta rise up on the geyser to get up to the moving platform above, in which case then continuing over to the right here. Drop down here and go through the pipe at the end. Thankfully, if you've lost any health, there actually is a full health replenishment located in this little room here. You want to make sure there that you get to the pipe in the upper right corner, and then it takes you to the Tweety encounter. This is a very easy encounter once again. Stand on the far right side. This will give you more opening space so Tweety can't hide behind the other rock formation. After Tweety is dealt with, we're moving on to the next stage. The next level begins with a little bit of a hilly environment. Watch out for the spikes falling down, and there's a few rocks also going to be tracking you through this area. Thankfully, when the lights go out, enemies like the falling spikes and ghosts and such do still appear, so you can at least see what threats are coming your way, at least some of them. This level is pretty easy and straightforward compared to some of the other levels that we've dealt with. There's no real maze path at all. It's just go all the way right, go left a little bit and down a couple of ramps, and then you're going to be going all the way left to finish up the stage. During this segment here, you want to be a little bit cautious of a few of the waterfalls coming. There's also those ghost enemies that are going to try to stop you as well. After the end of this corridor, that's already the end of the level. You just have to get the carrot with the Daffy room. You have to go to the far right here. You can jump up the rabbit season sign in and grab that carrot to move on to the next stage. The final level of the cave world is the more challenging one. There's plenty of waterfalls, spikes, and a bunch of pit areas that we have to deal with. This bridge will immediately break apart, every piece of it as you land on it, so best to try to just avoid it as much as you can. Watch out for the waterfall. If the lights go out and you need to wait a moment, just do so, and thankfully, like I said, you can see all those enemies, so even if it does go out, you know what's coming your way. Another breakable bridge not too long after that, along with a bunch of fallen spikes. There's a bunch of the geyser platforms. You can use them to grab extra carrots if you really want to do that. Here we have to wait a few moments for the platform to kind of come back our way, and we can jump on over to it. Here we have just a series of these moving platforms. Thankfully, you can kind of stand in between the falling spikes. They don't change up their pattern, so you can be safe for a few moments while waiting for the things to line up, so you can continue safely making your jumps. Thankfully, after one more breakable bridge, there's a heart power-up. You can get your full health back, and then we're jumping into the boss battle against Pepe Le Pew. He does fire out that skunk power-up. It's going to try to knock you out with a gas, but it moves really slow, kind of awkward, and you usually can easily hit him a few times before he's able to even let out one other cloud of noxious gas. Here we have the Willy the Weasel game. Your goal is to just keep taking out as many of them as possible. Every time that you reach one of the goals at the bottom, as you can see, the next one is at 14. So if I get 14, I get another one up. If I'm able to get to 17, I would get a third one up, so on and so forth, for as long and as many as you're able to get. And just another way to net some easy extra lives. Nothing too exciting, but a nice little distraction in between the various worlds of Bugs Bunny's Birthday Blowout. We're now in World 5 here. This is a forest-themed world. Looks similar to kind of the first themed area that was kind of like the grassy plain type thing, but pretty much more of that here. The worst part about these levels are the swinging ropes or vines that you have to use. Sometimes you may have to wait a few moments on one of the vines for it to bounce back so that you actually can make the jump to the next one. Eventually they will kind of reset themselves because they go kind of at different amounts of space so just waiting a few moments eventually will reset it. It just kind of slows you down a little bit sometimes. Other than that, there really isn't a whole lot else to report. We do have the green color scheme, so the stoplight worms are the correct colors in red and green for these stages. This level in particular is pretty much just a very long, straightforward path all the way to the very far right, and eventually we make it to the Daffy room. Daffy is in our direct line here, so you may get hit actually by him this time, but either way you want to kind of get up to those platforms above easily, grab the carrot, and move on to round 2 and stage 5. The next level is similar to what we were just dealing with, just some more pits at the very beginning. You can use these platforms to make a big leap all the way over to the far right to keep on trucking here. Here you can take the bottom platforms with some short jumps, but be very cautious. These platforms break apart, it can be annoying, and at the end we're going to use the carrot platforms that we make in order to get up. This spot can be a bit tricky with the frogs and such, but keep jumping up and eventually you can get to this top platform. Avoid the trash can, and then make a big leap over here, and you'll land, thankfully, safely either on the disappearing platform or that platform right below it, and then you can make it to the right corner to go through the pipe. Go through the other pipe or tree stump on the right, and here we have another encounter against Elmer Fudd. It's identical, I think, to the last one. He can catch you in that bullet and that net and stop you, but it moves really slowly. It's pretty easy to avoid, and Elmer Fudd will go down in just a few moments. The next level, start off by jumping up these platforms and wait a few moments for the rope to come back. It can be a little difficult to actually see the rope in this level because of the way that the trees are in the background. Though I do like that the trees and the leaves on them rustle, so a nice little animation for the background and nice to see here. Thankfully, the next set of vines that we have to deal with, or ropes, are a little bit easier to see on the light blue background here as we jump over the large waterfall below. Like I mentioned before, sometimes you may have to wait a couple of times before eventually you can finally get lined up enough that you can safely reach the other side. A lot of the blocks here will break as soon as you land on them, so just keep on moving through and quickly jump to the next platform. Watch out for a couple of spikes and then jump on this platform to the right that will blast you up into the sky into the next little area here. Climb up the platforms to the top platform and then head across the right here. Much easier than dealing with the ones below. Just like the last area, a lot of these blocks will break apart, but quickly get to the platform on the far right and you'll blast downwards this time back into the forest below. Jump up and grab the large carrot to finish up the stage. Yep, that's it. This level's a little bit weird the way it ends, but I'm not gonna complain. Next up is the fourth and final level here in the mountain-themed world. We're going to climb up a bunch of the platforms and get up into the sky pretty quickly. Head along the right here. It's going to slow down a lot because of all the falling clocks. Use the disappearing platforms if you like as you're moving across. The bridge is breaking, of course, with all these blocks, so a little bit difficult, but if you keep moving for it, you shouldn't have too much trouble or end up falling down into the pits below. You can use these disappearing platforms if you want to keep moving up, grab the heart here, and then drop down below to get into the boss chamber. The boss for this is Foghorn, Leghorn, and the Chicken Hawk. We're going to take out the Chicken Hawk first by using the platform of the Warner Brothers logo to get up, then drop on down and deal with Foghorn, Leghorn. He barely even moves, and you can easily hit him with the hammer. This boss at least gives you the two enemies at the same time, so at least it's a nice change-up, but still not very difficult or inspired, and we're moving on to the final world of Bugs Bunny's Birthday Blowout after doing another game of Whack-A-Mole. The final world of the game is a haunted house themed world. There is a little bit of new things introduced. You have some jumping flames that retract into pots, conveyor belts that you'll have to use consistently throughout the levels in order to get around, and then giant buzzsaws that will kind of crash on down on top of bugs. Really not too much of a threat though, as long as you move quickly past. There's also a series of rocks sometimes will fall and other little things, but for the most part you've seen a lot of what this level is going to throw at you already. Here you can take the top platform or the bottom one. With so much stuff kind of coming through, I just want to keep moving quickly through this area. Watch out for all the spikes falling here. It will slow things up, making it a little bit easy. We can take the top set of platforms here just to make it a little bit easier on ourselves, watching out for those fireballs before going through this series of very small corridors and reaching the pipe at the end. Once in here, you're just going to climb up using the blocks and grab that carrot to finish off another one of those Daffy rooms. For this level, we start off immediately with lots of stuff falling, rocks everywhere. The game immediately comes slowing down to a crawl as we head over to the right. The giant saw blade enemies that we were introduced in the last level 2 are back. This time they will attack left and right as well, similar to like kind of the thwomps and such that you see in Mario games. Here you can either use the platforms to get across, jump on top of the enemies to get across, or just take a little bit of damage from the spikes and get your way across even quicker. It's pretty much a long gauntlet room that you're dealing with here in this stage. There isn't any other rooms that we're going to have to deal with. Just lots of conveyor belts and spikes, plenty of hazards, and games slowing up, but hopefully you're able to hold on to at least a little bit of your health before you reach the boss chamber at the end. The bottom platforms here for the most part are safe until the very end where there's giant blades appear, but as long as you're on the bottom for most of it, you avoid the spikes easily. Here we have one more rematch against Elmer Fudd, same as before, nothing else getting in our way here. Avoid his bullet nets if you can, land those hits, and move on to level 3 here of World 6. Thankfully, this level does change things up a bit. We're not just running from left to right here. We will have to traverse a little bit more of a level here. After the first area, you'll make it to these conveyor belts. You'll have to jump up, back and forth, left and right up the conveyor belts in order to get to the top platform. Here you do have springs that can launch you upwards, so be careful of them and then enter the vase or pipe here on the left side. In the next room, climb up the ladder, watch out for the springs so you don't get sent up into the spikes, and then climb up another couple of ladders before reaching another one of those vases. Once in the next room, spikes will immediately start crashing down, watch out for them, and then start over to the far right and reach another large vase. Here, it looks like we're in the same exact room that we just did. It pretty much is, but technically is farther ahead. So yeah, it looks identical, but we've technically made progress here. Once we go through that pipe, we land in this room, starting with a conveyor belt with lots of little clocks on it. Watch out for the clocks, you can jump on them, of course. A few moments later, they will explode, but hopefully we can just get to the far right without having to deal with that. And then, guess what? It's this room again. Yeah, it's the same room. For a third time, but once again, we have made progress, and this thankfully is the last time we have to do it. This Daffy chamber, the last one, is a little tricky. We're going to use the platform on the right, jump on that, and then jump up, kind of like hitting the ceiling, but also tracing the ceiling, and this will allow us to get high enough to hit that carrot and move on to the final level of the game. The final level of the game is going to send, of course, lots of hazards your way, starting off with a spiky gauntlet, followed by a conveyor belt set, this time a little bit bigger than the ones we dealt with before as we make our way up to the top platform. On the top here, after another set of spikes, there is a vase. Jump down into the vase, then continue over to the right side here. Once in this room, there's another big spring. You can bounce off of that and get to the vase in the upper right corner. Pretty simple room. Right after that, we're going to continue on to the right, and it's more smaller conveyor belts this time, heading upwards. Very similar to kind of what we've already dealt with in this level. Kind of repeating set of rooms similar to what we did in the previous stage as well, as we get up here and reach another vase. Once into the next room, you'll notice immediately that this looks similar, at least to start off, but we're going to use the conveyor belt to just get over to that right side. Dropping down in here in the next room, immediately some rocks are going to fall down. Just wait between them in order to continue on. These platforms all break apart, a bit annoying, but be careful to hit the vase on that right side. Once in here, it's just another small room with a couple of vases. As you go through them, you'll pop out here, which sends you to the boss chamber, the final boss of the game. Here we deal with the Tasmanian Devil. He doesn't actually spin at you, instead he fires footballs at you that you have to bounce back using your hammer. This boss actually takes 6 hits in order to defeat, but once he's defeated, you get to sit back and enjoy the ending to Bugs Bunny's Birthday Blowout. So there you have it, Bugs Bunny's Birthday Blowout for the NES, celebrating Bugs' 50th anniversary, which was 1990. Bugs was first made into Bugs Bunny in July of 1940, though first appeared a few years prior, just didn't have the Bugs Bunny name attached to him quite yet. It's far from the most interesting NES game, and it may not be a classic to many, but Bugs Bunny's Birthday Blowout is a nice, fun, easy-to-do platformer that I can still boot up to this day if I just want to kind of relax with a little bit of retro goodness. With that, though, guys, it's going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching. Of course, I hope you enjoyed.